Good morning. Let's go ahead and do our Heritage Studies lesson today. You are not going to have an assignment today. It's an optional assignment. It's just one work text page. If you want to do it, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to, because it's not going to be something you're tested on. But today we're going to talk about the arts and the press, which the press is the newspaper. So we're going to read a little bit about that. We're going to be on page 120 in your reader book, 120 to 123. We're going to be talking about art and different artists during that time, music and writing. All of those things are considered the arts together. And then we're going to read a little bit about newspapers in that time. So let's look on page 120. Now remember, yesterday we've been talking about inventions and the different great inventions that were going on. But yesterday we learned a little bit about capitalism. We learned about those three very wealthy men in the United States who made their wealth here. Not only that, but we've also learned about the immigrants coming through Ellis Island. All right, let's look at page 120. It says the arts and the press. And you can rest assured I'm going to read today. But remember, you have to follow along with me, okay? So I want you to start with me on page 120. And here we go. During the Gilded Age, art, music, and writing flourished. Wealthy Americans wanted to fill their houses with beautiful things. Many gave dinners and parties in their homes. They wanted their guests to see tasteful art on the walls and enjoy the best music of the day. They wanted to show off their own libraries filled with books. Their wealth made them give more attention to the finer things of life. Now let's look at some art. And I've got a piece of art right here on the screen. This is just a 19th century American piece of art. I don't know much about it other than just what it says up here at Dartmouth College. So this is what American art would have been like in the 19th century. Let's look back on our page. One of the most popular forms of art was the portrait. A portrait is a picture of a person. Wealthy families would pay an artist to paint a portrait of a family member. A portrait was a way to preserve the memory of a husband, wife, or child. Portraits were costly and took time to create. The person being painted had to sit still for hours while the artist worked, but a beautiful painting to hang in the home was worth the trouble. John Singer Sargent was one of the most successful portrait painters. He was an American, but he spent much of his life in Europe. He studied the work of the great masters of his day. He tried to capture the thoughts and feelings of the people he painted. He painted several famous Americans, such as John D. Rockefeller and President Theodore Roosevelt. Mary Cassatt grew up in Pennsylvania. Early in life, she traveled to Europe and took drawing and music lessons. She later studied art in Philadelphia and in Paris, France. Some of her best-known works are her paintings of mothers and children. I love that painting at the top of page 121. Winslow Homer was another well-known artist of the Gilded Age. He worked in Boston and New York City. Later, he moved to the Maine coast. He was known for painting scenes from everyday life. Children at school and at play, country life, coastal scenes are common in his work. Louis Tiffany, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, worked in many forms of art. He became best known for his stained glass objects. His mosaics and lampshades decorated the rooms of many wealthy homes. You see that Tiffany lamp right there? We call those anytime, and people still have those in their homes. They're called Tiffany lamps because of the man's name, Louis Tiffany. Look at page 122. Americans enjoyed different styles of music in the Gilded Age. A composer named Edward MacDowell wrote classical piano music. Perhaps his best-known piece is To a Wild Rose. A composer from Hungary named Antonin Dvorak spent several years teaching music in America. He wrote a symphony called From the New World. This work was first performed in Carnegie Hall, New York's newly built concert hall. The audience cheered wildly at each break in the music. The symphony is one of the most lasting musical works from its time. Marching music was also popular in this period. John Philip Sousa wrote several of his marches in the 1890s. The Stars and Stripes Forever is still one of America's best loved songs. At the very end of the 1800s, a new form of music called ragtime became popular. Ragtime mixed classical music with African American music styles. A black composer named Scott Joplin wrote many ragtime songs. The Gilded Age is named after a book with the same name. One of the book's writers was Mark Twain. He also wrote novels about the adventures of two young boys, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I just finished that novel. Works by Louisa May Alcott rose to fame during this time as well. Her novels, Little Women and Little Men, are still read widely today. A poet named Emily Dickinson wrote hundreds of poems in her lifetime, but few people knew about them until after her death in 1886. Today, they are thought to be some of the greatest American poetry ever written. Now the newspapers. The press, which is a nickname for the newspaper, had a great deal of power in the Gilded Age. People believed what they read in the newspapers, but the newspapers didn't always print only facts. Two New York newspapers became famous for mixing fiction with the news. Their owners, Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, each tried to sell the most papers. They made their news stories as exciting as possible, but this meant that they often stretched the truth. Sometimes people were hurt by false reports about them in the papers. Some benefits came from the press. Newspapers helped raise money for important causes. Pulitzer used his paper to raise more than $100,000 toward a stand for the Statue of Liberty. Newspapers also gave their readers humor. The first comic strips were published in newspapers in 1896. And then there's some pictures there on the pages. Mark Twain. Now that wasn't his real name. Mark Twain was just his, what they call his pen name. His real name was Samuel Clemens. Some more art there. So every culture must have their arts and their writings and music, that kind of thing. And ours did. Early American arts is some of the best. I would play some ragtime music for you on here, but I'm not so sure I could find it. That might be something that perhaps your grandmother could find for you, but you could ask her about ragtime music. Not real sure, but you might could find that on here. I've heard some of it before, and it's pretty good. So anyway, I'm not going to go back through and ask you any questions about the arts and things because I don't believe most of these are going to be on your test. I've looked at it, and I don't believe they are. Like I said, your assignment is optional, but if you want to do it for an extra 13 points, you can do page 52. It's going to be going over all these names and things that we read about today, okay? Now, if you have any questions or need any help on the page, just let me know and send me a message, all right? That'll be all for today.